For the first quarter century of independence, India's government functioned as a singular monolith, with the same political party controlling both the central government and nearly every state legislature. Federal tension rarely had cause to surface. That political dominance ended following the 1975 to 1977 emergency. The subsequent elections placed rival parties in charge of the center and several states simultaneously, creating the first real test of the constitutional structure. Because political alignment had suppressed legal conflict for so long, these state governments had rarely tested the limits of their own authority. Now, suddenly facing a hostile central government, they began to treat the rights already written into the Constitution as active, enforceable shields for their own autonomy. This friction sparked a debate that continues today. The Supreme Court has frequently argued that India has a unitary bias, suggesting that its federal features are essentially watered down to meet the country's developmental needs. That interpretation relies on a very specific comparison. If you look at the unitary-looking features the court cites, you find those same powers in constitutions that are undisputedly federal, including the United States, Australia, and Canada. To understand if India is truly federal, we have to look past abstract theory and examine the practical pressures that forced this constitution into existence. The sheer size of the subcontinent, paired with its deep linguistic and regional differences, created what scholars call a federal situation. Even before a constitution was written, the geography itself made a purely unitary state practically impossible to maintain. Despite this reality, early British reports like the 1929 Simon Commission explicitly advised against a federation, viewing it as a distant, unnecessary goal. But three practical pressures forced the issue. First, the momentum for political independence was becoming unstoppable, and every concession from the British brought a fuller transfer of power closer to the provinces. Second, the provinces were already bound together by shared infrastructure. Common railways, postal services, and economic policies had built a high degree of national cohesion that any new government had to accommodate. Third, the autocratic rulers of India's princely states backed a federation for their own reasons. They saw it as the best way to accept British suzerainty while preserving their own powers and blocking the spread of democratic movements into their own territories. The Indian Federation wasn't born from a single ideology. It was a compromise between nationalists fighting for freedom, autocrats clinging to power, and administrators trying to keep a massive system running. The hardest test for this compromise is Article 356, the mechanism that allows the central government to take direct control over a state in the event of a failure of constitutional machinery. This power has a controversial history. It was directly adapted from Sections 45 and 92 of the Colonial Government of India Act of 1935. The British designed that original provision to stop the independence movement. Because the Congress Party was entering legislatures specifically to wreck them from within, the British gave governors the power to seize control and bypass uncooperative state leaders. This creates a strange paradox. Why would the leaders of independent India take a tool used to suppress them and embed it into their own democratic constitution? The framers realized that the same mechanism could serve as an extreme emergency brake. If the constitutional machinery of a state were to fail, the central government needed a way to intervene and prevent total collapse. While central intervention might look like a departure from federalism, comparative legal history suggests otherwise. Strong intervention mechanisms are actually common in established federations. Look at Article 4 of the U.S. Constitution. This guarantee clause requires the federal government to ensure every state maintains a republican form of government, even authorizing the use of force to restore it if a state government is dismantled. This works because of the distinction between external and internal sovereignty. A nation can act as a single sovereign unit to the outside world, while remaining divided and sovereign internally, with power shared between central and state governments. The existence of powerful central emergency mechanisms reflects the specific challenges of governing a massive subcontinent. This framework is designed to let the system bend under pressure rather than fracturing. However, a tool designed to protect a constitution can also be used to undermine it. In the decades that followed, Article 356 would be invoked more often and more controversially than the founders ever intended.